You talking to me?
Of course, we're talking to you. It's episode 2 of the CineChat podcast, of course. My name is Matt,
My name's Mary.
and welcome. This week, in honour of The Irishman being released this month, we are going to be talking about all things Martin Scorsese in this episode and his films. How are you feeling about this one, Mary? Because this is our first proper deep dive into one topic.
Yeah, I didn't think it would be Martin Scorsese either. Just the timing, I suppose.
Yeah,
Because for me, he's not my favourite filmmaker by any means. You are a lot more prepped than me as well for this
I'd
because
watched a lot this week.
yeah, you watched what 7 or 8 films for this. And
7 in the end, which I maybe regret.
yeah, I watched 2.
2.
So yes, I had a very busy week, and one of them was one I hadn't seen though.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm feeling good about this.
There were 2 films I watched this week that I hadn't seen before as well, so I do feel like I've not just covered old ground. I've actually progressed in some way in getting his filmography out of the way. But I've actually really enjoyed it. I think it's easy when someone is so prevalent in the industry to sort of forget why they're good.
Yeah.
Revisiting some of the things that I hadn't seen for about 10 years was really eye-opening, actually, because I don't think I'd given him the credit that maybe he deserved before.
Yeah, I watched a short video about his directing today actually, and it's amazing what you don't credit him for when you actually watch the clips that they put together and see them in sequence. You think, oh wow, actually, yeah, this is why he is Martin Scorsese.
Yeah, I watched a couple as well, and I sort of got more of a sense of what you were describing last week about him having this knowledge and this, a real understanding of crucially what is cinema and what it can do, and
Oh yeah,
really like that. But we're going to get into all of this because first we've got to have our weekly news.
Mhm.
You know what I'm going to say, don't you?
I do.
Cue the news. So, what's been going on this week? I'm very excited.
Okay, so we've had a fair few bits of casting news actually. The biggest of which probably is that Colin Farrell, I think, has now been confirmed to play Penguin in the Robert Pattinson Batman movie.
I hadn't heard this, but I heard about the next bit you're going to say.
And yes,
Andy
Andy
Serkis
Serkis is playing Alfred.
I'm so regretting not inviting him to my dinner party. Andy, if you're listening, I'm so sorry. James Dean can go. he should have been on my list.
This is really interesting casting. I'm totally against Robert Pattinson being Batman. I don't mind people knowing that. You can talk to me in the comments. Really don't mind, but I cannot visualize this.
I'm open
whatsoever.
I'm open to seeing what they'll do.
Yeah, I'm open to it, but I just can't see it at all. But the rest of the casting news, I'm really intrigued by.
Yeah, I love that Andy Serkis as Alfred. I can see it. It just makes sense.
It's the same sort of feeling I had about Joker.
Yeah.
I couldn't see it, but everything about it was intriguing.
Yeah.
So I'm getting the same vibe about this.
This is the first I'd heard about the Colin Farrell news. This is new to me. Obviously, I can't picture it right now, but
I can only see Danny DeVito in my head.
it's so different from Danny DeVito that
Absolutely.
that I'm intrigued, like you say, and kind of excited by the idea of them doing something completely different. Yeah, I'm interested by that. What else is there this week?
There is Fantastic Beasts. The third film is set in Brazil apparently, and it starts shooting next spring.
Well,
David Yates is back to direct, and the Potter movie veteran Steve Kloves is working on a script with J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, I think she needed some help with where it was going.
Oh, I do. Yeah, the first film I really enjoyed. The second one
Was pants.
not so much.
What was going on?
It was. I mean, it was visually stunning.
Yeah, and that's only to be expected.
It was a gorgeous movie.
But the direction of it was
it's all over the place.
twist after twist to the point where I didn't even know what it was about anymore.
I came out and I just thought I'm not entirely sure what happened in that film, and I was in there for like over 2 hours. So what happened? So she definitely needed help.
I do like the idea that each film's taking place in a different country, because that was the whole idea of this Newt Scamander character going around the world and collecting these animals. I'm assuming that's mainly what he was doing.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued by that. I do like that aspect, and we're getting to see more of this world that she's created. But yeah, she needs to sort of reel it in a little bit.
Yeah,
The fact that she was writing 5 films was just why
it's
too much
too
overkill.
much for me, I think. But we'll see.
Calm down, JK.
Yeah. And then the other pieces of news are reviews, really. The Terminator Dark Fate movie has,
Flop.
I think, lost about 100 million at the box office.
Mm.
It's really,
It's flopped hard by the sounds of it.
yeah, it's not good. And Midway has just come out,
Mm.
and that is currently rotten at 44%
Yeah,
on the tomato meter on Rotten Tomatoes. So that's not looking good either.
I was actually really excited for Midway, but mostly just because it looked so good. Um,
I think it'll have the same kind of effect as the other films of it's Roland
it's Roland
Emmerich,
Emmerich,
isn't
yeah,
it? Yeah, I think it'll have the same effect as his others. I think people will see it and it will make some money, but the critics are going to panic.
yeah. Style over substance, I think.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a bit empty, but looks good.
Hmm.
Cool. Well, busy week in the world of film.
Yeah.
Lovely. And that's the news. Lovely. Right. Well, time to get into the meat of the subject this week. We're back to Martin Scorsese. Yay! So yeah, obviously, like we said earlier, I've done a lot of watching this week. Mary, you know the man inside and out.
Not personally.
Oh, I must have misunderstood. Sorry, I've just
um,
completely misunderstood there. Sorry.
oh, sorry.
Sorry. So we should start by talking about what our relationship, non-personal relationship is with Martin Scorsese and his films. Um,
Yeah.
when was the first time you watched one of his films?
Oh gosh. I think probably my first films, I can't remember what the very first one was, but I'm a really big Leonardo DiCaprio
Mm,
fan. So I think probably the first ones for me will have been the likes of The Aviator and things like that, and Shutter Island, and all the films that he made with him.
yeah, it's sort of like the latter half, isn't it?
Yeah, I was gravitated to films that he made, and at the time, it didn't really matter to me who the director was.
Yeah,
It was just a Leo
it was
DiCaprio film.
Leonardo
So
DiCaprio.
yeah, so
See, mine's the complete opposite, actually. Mine all started when I was in college. The very first film, I can put it on record now, the very first film I ever studied properly in full was Goodfellas.
wow.
And shortly after that, we were doing Taxi Driver and The Departed as well. So mine kind of started from the other way, from his classic side up.
Yeah, I think we definitely have very different viewpoints of where we kind of gravitate
Yeah.
towards his films. Mine is very much 21st century Scorsese. His early films don't really um, draw me.
Hmm.
The whole gangster plot for me in any type of film, not just a Scorsese film, it's just not something that I'm really drawn to. I wouldn't automatically go and see a gangster film.
Yeah.
I don't really get much from it. So his earlier films, I mean, obviously his legacy is mostly, Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, Goodfellas, Casino, and they all have an element of the gangster to them. So for me, it's his more genre pictures.
Mm. What's hilarious though is last week we were talking about how you were more classical and I was more contemporary.
Exactly, yeah. And we've flipped.
The other thing is that these gangster films, to me, they're not typical. I find that he's done something very different with the genre here. So I'm wondering whether your view of what a gangster film is or is about or should be about maybe is different to what I see and think.
Possibly, possibly. I mean, don't get me wrong. His version of these films is very different. He has a style all his own, and that's part of what makes him him.
Mm.
Um, but it's not really enough to draw me, as we've mentioned before. The the way a film is made doesn't necessarily make it the be all and end all for me.
Right.
The narrative really is what kind of pulls me in, as it does to an ordinary audience member, someone who hasn't studied it or been in
Yeah.
in classes learning about how a film is made. They just go in, and if the story's something they like, they'll like it.
Mhm.
If it's not, then they won't. I tend to kind of sway more towards that
Yeah.
kind of viewing. And for me, 20th century Scorsese doesn't quite hit the mark for me as much as 21st century does.
So essentially, what we're going to do in this episode, we're going to take a cross section of his major works, and we're going to talk about them a little bit later on.
Yeah.
Before we do that, we should probably get a bit more of an idea of what he's like as not just a filmmaker, but as the other contributions to cinema as well.
Which are huge.
Mm.
He has such a passion for cinema. I mean, his films as a whole, I wouldn't probably put him in my top 5 filmmakers really for me personally. However, he just emits such passion for cinema.
Mm.
You just have to listen to him talking about it to see how enthusiastic he is about it. And he has done such amazing work in film preservation
Mm.
because he loves cinema so much. He doesn't want to see any of it go.
More than ever right now, it's a time where we have to be very careful about the future direction of cinema because it's at risk of dying out. And I think it's
Yeah.
quite a scary thought for a lot of people who work in that industry.
Well, digital's a whole new ball game, really. They were working on film, and film disintegrates.
It does.
So we're looking at losing all of these
Yeah.
films that were made in the 20th century.
Which would be devastating.
Exactly. And he is extremely passionate about film
Mm.
preservation and making sure that we are able to still see all of those classic films and in as great a quality as possible.
The thing is, it wouldn't just be the loss of a film, it's the loss of history and
Oh, absolutely.
the record of technological advancements and
Yeah.
people who were pioneers in science and technology, and not to mention like the stories that were told as well.
Yeah, exactly.
To lose all of that would be hard.
I think it's that about him that kind of draws me to him. I could sit and listen to him for hours,
It rubs off.
talking. Yeah, he just has such a passion for it, and it's that I think really leads me to him. However, I do have a few little quibbles recently with his
Yes, he's in the news.
recent comments. He has been in the news quite a bit recently.
Go ahead.
So a couple of months ago, he did an article for Empire magazine, and in that article, they asked him a question about Marvel movies, and he answered it and said that he tried to watch a few of them, but they weren't for him, and that they seemed to be closer to theme parks than they were to movies, and he didn't consider them cinema, basically. And people seem to have really seized onto the last
That
part of
last
that.
part, it's a bold statement.
Yeah, it is, and people are taking it out of context, and um, there's been a lot said
Yeah.
about it, especially with him doing the rounds at the moment.
Oh yeah.
For the Irishman, everybody is asking him about this. So he's recently, actually, in response to this, because it's been talked about so much, he's written an article for the New York Times on the 4th of November, and given his response to this. So he said that the fact that the films themselves don't interest him is a matter of personal taste and temperament. He said that basically, if he was younger and if he'd come of age at that time, then he might have been excited about them and he might have even wanted to make one himself. But he grew up when he did, which was the 50s and 60s, and he developed a sense of movies of what they were and what they could be. And that is such a far place from where the Marvel universe is, which is fair enough. It's fair enough.
It's good that he clarified that eventually, but I don't know whether it's a bit too late.
Yeah, he's not helped himself really. I mean, he said that for him, he sees cinema as an art form, and well, a lot of people are going to say, "So what are you saying that it's Marvel films are not an
Yeah.
art form?" He's gone on to say that many of the elements that define cinema as he knows it are there in the Marvel films, but what's not there is revelation, mystery, or genuine emotional danger. Nothing's at risk. The pictures are made to satisfy a specific set of demands, and they are designed as variations on a number
Yeah.
of themes. They're sequels in name, but they're really remakes in spirit.
Now I can agree with him. The first quote that he said saying they're not cinema, I just think that's unfair.
Yeah,
I'm not that much into the Marvel films either. I mean, I've watched them all. I do enjoy quite a lot of them.
yeah.
But to say that they're not cinema, but they are. I don't know how else to put that. So
Yeah, it's a cinema's a broad range, and what he's also said is that everything in them is officially sanctioned because it can't really be any other way. That's the nature of modern film franchises. They're market researched, audience tested, vetted, modified, re-vetted, and remodified until they're ready for consumption.
it's very much a formula.
Yeah, exactly. He's gone on to answer. So why might you might ask, what's my problem?
Yeah.
Why not just let superhero movies and other franchise films be? And he said the reason's simple. In many places around this country and around the world, franchise films are now your primary choice if you want to see something on the big screen. It's a perilous time in film exhibition, and there are fewer independent theatres than ever. The equation has flipped, and streaming has become the primary delivery system. Still, I don't know a single filmmaker who doesn't want to design films for the big screen to be projected before audiences in theatres.
This is interesting because now we're going into awards season, and I'm pretty sure you have the same problem every year.
Yes.
Some films that are actually really major in the world of good quality filmmaking, awards worthy,
Yeah.
those kind of films, you don't tend to actually get a lot of them released. I really struggle to access some of them,
Yeah.
especially when we're trying to watch them in time for and actually see them win awards.
Exactly. He's even said that it includes him. He's speaking as someone that has just made a film for Netflix with The Irishman, and that it's the only way that they could make The Irishman the way they needed to,
Mm,
and for that he'll always be thankful. And they have a theatrical window, which is great, but he'd like it to play longer if it could. Of course he would,
yeah.
but no matter whom you make your movie with, the fact is that screens in most multiplexes are crowded with franchise pictures.
It sort of says the way it's going isn't really a choice. It's almost like it's a necessary change,
Yeah,
whether or not you like it or not.
exactly. Exactly. He said that they still overlap from time to time, but that's becoming increasingly rare. And he fears that the financial dominance of one is being used to marginalize and even belittle the
Mm.
existence of the other. And I actually totally agree with
It's
that.
all
As
about
much
the
as I
money.
like Marvel, and you're looking for those smaller
Mm.
films,
Yeah,
and they are very rare, and they're just being pushed out little by little because they cannot compete with the
yeah.
blockbusters.
This is why I'm not a big summer film person. You'll see usually that I go quite quiet,
Yeah.
and I'm not very vocal about things in the summer period. But as soon as it gets to about now, this is like my Christmas.
But that's why Martin Scorsese and filmmakers like him are so important, because they are pushing and fighting to keep
Yeah,
those types of films alive.
it's more important than people think.
Oh, absolutely. So, should we get into the movies then?
I think we definitely should.
Okay.
I have a feeling you're going to give quite a subjective review,
Probably.
and I can offer a bit more of a under the surface analysis of the general style that he's got going on in the film. Does that sound like a plan?
Yes. So, should we start with Taxi Driver?
Yeah,
I rewatched it this week. I hadn't seen it since I was 16, which was the first time I watched it. At the time, I thought, it's a big film. Everyone talks about it, so I'll
yeah.
watch it. I didn't like it. So I thought, well, 12 years pretty much nearly have gone by, so
You've
I'll
grown
I'll
up a
give it
bit.
another go. I've grown up a bit. I have to admit, I still don't like it.
Mm.
Narrative wise, I find it very difficult to get on board with when the main character is not a good person,
Well,
when you're following someone who is morally ambiguous.
ambiguous, yes, but I don't think really any of his main characters are bad people.
Yeah, it's true. They're complicated.
I think they are normal people who make mistakes.
He makes a lot of mistakes, Matt. He makes a lot of
Not in
mistakes.
Taxi Driver, he doesn't.
Well, it really made me think about mental health when
Absolutely.
I was watching it, actually, which I didn't think about at all the
The
first
first
time I
time
watched
around,
it. Yeah, but it really,
it resonates differently now.
absolutely, because mental health is a really big thing now, especially talking about men's mental health.
Yeah.
And he is shut up on his own in this apartment, and like there's moments in it where you see him, like, getting the guns prepared, sharpening knives. It's quite scary.
But also, I think you're missing something.
Go on then.
He only buys guns about halfway through the film.
It's true. It's true.
Up until then, I think we're made to feel really, really very sorry for him. We know we hear that he's a Vietnam War vet.
Yeah.
He's obviously come back not particularly very well. He's an insomniac, but it's really clear that he's come back to a world that he doesn't understand anymore.
Yeah.
He's changed by what he's been through, and he's very lonely.
Oh yeah.
And what he sees from his perspective in that taxi is what he sees as filth on the street. All of a sudden, everything's uncensored and it's very non-traditional now. Everything's quite explicit, and he just doesn't fit in anymore, which I think is necessary context to why he does what he does. And it's not actually his idea to get guns and things like that. It's the other
Mm.
taxi drivers that tell him,
Yeah, it's true.
you should arm yourself.
Scorsese's style in this is something I did appreciate that I didn't see as much the first time. He really does show a very specific style that shows up in the rest of his work as well,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you noticed in a lot more detail than I did even.
Are we talking like he has the internal monologue? We have this voiceover narration. We get a
Yes.
lot of things from his perspective. We're very much introduced to the stories of his films through the eyes of the main character.
Absolutely.
They tell us what they're thinking, what they're feeling. We see what they're seeing in the way that they see it. And I think it's a really unique access point that Scorsese gives us into these worlds that we wouldn't usually see. And yeah, you're right, you do see it across a lot of his other films as well. One thing I just want to shout out about Taxi Driver is it's one of the only films I can think of from Scorsese that has an original score as opposed to just songs that are put on the soundtrack.
That's true, yeah.
It's by Bernard Herrmann, who did the music for Psycho most famously.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's this lonely sort of saxophone that repeats.
I hated the score.
What? Get
I
out.
didn't like I know you mentioned it when I started watching it about
Really?
the score, and do you know what?
I love
It
it.
was too much for me.
In what way?
Because like you say, it was very repetitive.
But it completely and so accurately reflects the main character.
Hmm.
Like just in the way we hear his voice on the soundtrack, the music on the soundtrack is doing exactly the same.
Oh yeah, it works well as part of the style and the narrative.
Mm.
Just for me personally, by the time I got to the end, uh, I was sick of the score.
Good.
Yeah,
That's the point, I think. There's a bit in the film where he says every day is indistinguishable from the rest and it's a long continuous chain.
yeah.
It perfectly reflects him as a character.
Hmm.
It encapsulates him.
So moving on to Raging Bull. What did you think of Raging Bull?
This was my first time watching this. Yeah, I really did enjoy it. It took me a little bit longer to sort of get into the style of this one. I think maybe because we don't have that option of colour,
Yeah.
which isn't a problem at all. He definitely did other things with this film. To summarise it overall, the one thing that really stood out to me was the way that the boxing scenes were shot compared to the scenes outside of the ring.
Oh yeah, he didn't want to do it like any other sports movie in the past had been made. He wanted it to be different, and it certainly was.
Yeah,
He definitely made it its own thing.
it's definitely a lesson in how different choices of film language, I guess you could say, and the arrangement of those can elicit those sort of emotional and psychological effects
Oh yeah.
and the atmosphere as well. For example, the boxing sequences are very theatrical and choreographed. There's lots of very quick cuts, bits of slow motion, fast motion, extreme close-ups of cameras flashing and the sound of the bell, and in general there's almost like a tempestuous soundscape underneath. But outside of the ring, it's very long takes,
Yeah.
less cutting, very normal sounds. You can just hear the sounds of the street. There's not a lot of soundtrack
Yeah.
in terms of music going on and things like that. So that sort of juxtaposition of ordinary life and life within the ring plays up to sort of the duality of that character of Jake LaMotta. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. I haven't seen Raging Bull for quite a few years, but what I remember about it is just Robert De Niro.
He's brilliant. Yeah.
He is just something else in that, and the transformation from the younger Jake LaMotta to the older
Yes.
is just
He
unbelievable.
gained about 60 pounds, I think.
Yeah, the fact that he did that all himself, it was completely
Actors didn't really do that back then, I don't think.
no, not really, no. No, it didn't go that far into it.
Yeah, commit and change yourself. And it was sort of a good early instance of people who were taking measures to transform themselves and become the character that they're playing.
Well, you can imagine the likes of Daniel Day-Lewis and Christian Bale
Yeah.
watching this movie and thinking, "Wow, that is commitment. That is how I want to do this."
And that was an Oscar win for De Niro as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's very different performance to Goodfellas,
It is.
which kind of encapsulates, I think, Scorsese's style in this one. He actually said that he sees things quickly,
Mm,
and he's tried to format that into a style. And when I think of Scorsese, I actually do think of that, because he seems to flip from one scene to another very quickly, and you go
mm.
backwards and forwards very
Every
quickly.
film is like a long montage.
Yeah,
It very rarely slows down and stops.
yeah.
Yeah, it's always propelling forwards and keeping
Mm.
that momentum, but it never loses that sense of the story that's happening at the same time.
Yeah, you get that narrative, especially in Goodfellas. That's one of the most memorable parts of it, is the narrative over the top
Yeah,
of the action. And his action is, it's like tracking and lots of following
mm.
people. And I mean, it's got that famous shot where
The Copacabana.
they go all the way from, yeah, all the way from the outside into the kitchen and through all the way to the stage, and it's all in one shot, and it's incredibly done.
I think if there's one word to sum it up, it's kinetic.
Yes, absolutely.
Everything is always moving, whether it's fast or slow, everything's always got a sense of motion to it, and it's very dynamic.
That sums up his films, I think. They do have this momentum. There is this movement to them. There always is, and every one, you can't not have that in a Scorsese movie, really, because that's just the way he sees things.
I think talking about the editing in his films is actually crucial, and his collaboration with Thelma Schoonmaker, because
Oh, absolutely.
without that style of editing and without her input, I don't think his films would even be memorable.
No, it's just sheer collaboration that they have.
There's lots of mixed media in here as well. It'll cut away to adverts or infomercials, home videos, signs,
Yeah,
newspaper articles. We're given extra information to supplement what we get from just the main story and the performances.
yeah.
It often results in comedy, like dark comedy. So sometimes we
Mm.
could get two things that are cut together that completely don't belong together, which sort of like makes you feel a bit uncomfortable. There's times where say the music that you hear completely contrasts with the action that you can see. For example, it might be a really upbeat song mixed with some very graphic violence,
Oh,
and it
absolutely.
kind of makes you feel a little bit like, are we meant to be laughing? Is this meant to be fun?
Yeah.
It always sort of throws you off, and that dark comedy element's a really unique effect that can be created from editing these different things together.
That really does create a style, that all of his earlier films
Mm,
take on.
yeah.
You can see that style in all of them. But what would you say if we went to the likes of Gangs in New York, which came out in 2002,
Mhm.
and kind of sort of ended his collaboration with De Niro until recently, because he kind of found a new muse,
Yeah.
you could say, in Leonardo DiCaprio. So how would you say Gangs of New York differs from his
If I'm
earlier
being
work?
honest, I can't remember Gangs of New York very well. It's not one of the ones I watched this week either, and I think it's because I don't remember it being memorable. Apart from Daniel Day-Lewis,
Yes, he is
yeah,
extremely memorable.
it'd be a very different film without him in it.
Oh, yes, absolutely. He just lit up the screen in that film.
So while I can't comment necessarily on how the style has changed, only going off how memorable the film was, I can only imagine that the style wasn't as quick and sharp and intelligent as it had been before, and I think there was more of a focus on performance.
Performance and story, yes, the story is more important. Character work has always been important in his films, um, but the style was very at the forefront for a lot of them. Whereas I think you still see parts of it in Gangs of New
Mm.
York. The editing is still quick and sharp, and you move from one thing to the next extremely quickly. Because the way he shows you things, the way he sees it and views it is quick. So it happens like that in most of his
Hmm.
films. But Gangs of New York, I think because of when it's set as well, there's something added to it. For me personally, the production design and the costumes are
Oh yeah.
phenomenal. I think in that
Mhm.
film, it just creates a time that you can't really see, you can't visualize it as much, and then he brings it completely to life. And it may not be, for a lot of people, I think, felt the same way, that Gangs of New York wasn't as good
Yeah.
as his earlier work, but it still has something.
I don't think he's ever lost that style. I just think it works in some guises more than others.
Yeah, now that follows through into his next film, which was The Aviator, which came out in 2004.
Yeah.
um I absolutely love that movie. It's fantastic. And I think part of the reason I like it is because it is old Hollywood.
Mm.
It's got the likes of Catherine Hepburn in it. And I mean, Kate Blanchett won a supporting actress Oscar for her performances.
Yeah, just to clarify, she was playing Katharine Hepburn, not Katharine Hepburn was in the film. Yeah.
No, she died by then, unfortunately.
No, I knew that. I'm just making sure everyone else knew. Yeah.
But she was fantastic in it, and the performances themselves. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, and I haven't seen Capote, and I'm sure it's fantastic. But Leonardo DiCaprio should have won the Oscar that year because it was an incredible performance.
I definitely need to rewatch it. I watched some of the trailers back just to sort of get a sense again of what it was about, and immediately I regretted not watching it again.
It's a really beautiful film as well. It's beautifully lit, and obviously with it being in LA, and it's very bright and colourful, and just some of the shots in that are superbly done.
Mm.
I do really enjoy that one.
One thing I like about his choice of stories, and I think it's probably the same for The Aviator as well, is that their kind of films always come in two halves. There's always like the rise of the main character, and then there's like the fall. I remember the same from The Aviator as well, because he does have, is it OCD
Yeah.
that he suffers with?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah, very badly.
It's quite destructive.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I watched this morning for the first time The Departed, which was his next film, and I've now seen it, so I can tick it off my
Hooray.
list. Um, and I can I can see what everybody else sees in it. It is an extremely well-made film. I think the script is
Mm.
really good. I think the dialogue, it's fast and it's quick and it's kind of brutal in some ways, and that all plays in its favor. It's superbly done in that sense. I loved seeing Matt Damon play the bad guy because he's just such a fresh-faced, nice guy.
What I would love about this is that nobody in this film is either good or bad.
It is. It's very cryptic and it's extremely complex. So in that sense, it was good, and I liked seeing Matt Damon play against type.
There's so much good acting going on in here, and the only person who was nominated, I think, for an Oscar for this was Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, he's balls to the wall, like completely out there, and he leaves it all there. Which is probably why he got, the nomination.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I didn't really like him either. It was too much for me,
Yeah.
that performance. But yeah, I just, again, it goes into the whole cops and gangsters storyline, which I think just inevitably for me, it is not
Mm.
the type of film that draws me in. But I do appreciate that it is a very well
When you
made
say
film.
it's complex, I can't agree more.
It is. It is. It's
It
extremely
keeps you on your
complex.
toes. It's a very sort of clever setup. For anyone who doesn't know, without spoiling it, we should probably say you've got a gang, and then you've got the police, and the police have got a mole in the gang, and the gang have got a mole inside the police, and neither knows who's in which one. And it's an extreme chase of cat and mouse, and the stakes always feel really, really, really high.
You do feel that as you're getting towards the end, like the last half an hour, and things are starting to go wrong, and it's again, it's the fall.
Mm,
Um, and you do feel that the stakes couldn't be higher, and it's dramatic. The tension is
mhm.
starting to build. I just wish it hadn't been quite as long.
Oh,
Not though, saying that,
The Aviator's longer.
it is, but saying that, I think that's just personal taste for me. The whole cops and robbers gangster thing doesn't do much for me
Mm,
personally. Whereas The Aviator was right up my street, classical old Hollywood, and I was just
yeah,
interested all the way through. But saying that, I don't know what you would cut out of it.
exactly. Well, what's interesting is it's based on a Hong Kong action film called Infernal Affairs,
It is,
which is considerably shorter. Um, but yeah, I agree. I don't think you could have this film without having everything in there that's in there right now.
yeah.
One thing, just as a really brief point as well, after having watched a lot of the older films before watching The Departed again,
Mm,
you don't realise that the early ones don't have computers and mobile phones and things like that. The Departed suddenly introduces this, and it's a whole new
mm.
way of networking these different characters together. I love that.
It is, but it doesn't feel any different.
No,
It doesn't. You don't feel the difference, um, because it still has that frenetic style
yes,
that he's had from the beginning. It's an added element, but you don't really feel it. That he's suddenly kind of come into the 21st century, and
no, I agree.
it's just all as it should be. So yeah, I do appreciate it, but as a film, personally for me, it didn't really fit my tastes.
That's understandable. I appreciate what you said in terms of like the good from a filmmaking standpoint. I personally love it.
The next one he made was Shutter Island, which I know you don't really like.
I want to like it.
No, can I tell them what you did call it though when you talked to me about it? Can I tell them?
Yeah, go for it.
So when I said that I was going to watch it, Matt called it Shitter Island, and I had to ask him whether he'd accidentally misspelt it or whether he had done that on purpose.
I had, but I deliberately chose not to correct it. It's honestly, it is fine, and I really appreciate what they were trying to achieve with it. My main problem with it is that when I first watched it, the twist wasn't a surprise. It hadn't been spoiled for me beforehand, and I can only put this in a way that's a compliment to Scorsese, is that he's such a good storyteller.
Visually, yeah.
He's so good that he was too good at giving us the clues to the twist all the way through.
But I wonder how much of that though is the fact that Shutter Island's actually based on a book.
See, I don't know.
It's by Dennis Lehane. So is it the fact that the story really was already made? Could you call that his doing, or is he just following the book?
I see what you mean now. Yeah, because he's so visual in how he tells his stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's moments really early on where the main character's like, where are my cigarettes? I always have my cigarettes, and I'm just like, okay, so something's wrong there. 2 minutes later, his buddy is basically struggling to get his gun out of his holster, and I'm like, well, there's a problem there. Next minute, all the patients are recognizing him, and I'm just like, right, I've got it now.
Can I say that you are extremely perceptive though, for films? You watch a really large amount of films,
Yeah.
so you are extremely perceptive to things like that. For me, when I watched it, I didn't see that. I didn't get it, and maybe your average moviegoer, maybe they wouldn't see that.
That makes me feel a little bit disappointed in Scorsese because I know that he could have done that so much better, and the twist could have been a much bigger payoff. The twist itself, I might add, starts 45 minutes before the end.
Yeah.
They spell everything out at the end. Just spend so much of it giving us the information so well that it's not a mystery anymore, and the film failed a bit for me.
What did you think of it aesthetically, though? For me, I loved it visually. It's a stunning looking film. It's even got horror elements to it in parts.
I think in terms of like the location and the settings and the sets, and obviously it's this part prison, part hospital, that whole aspect of it, yeah, brilliant. There was a few examples where I think he'd started to dip into green screen and CGI stuff, which I don't think worked.
Yeah.
And I don't think it worked very well in Hugo either, which is another film he did. It's too obvious. And I think when you're creating a film about any character that's really human, to sort of have these extravagant elements to it, it just doesn't gel for me. It didn't feel like a Scorsese film to me.
Okay, well, let's move on to Hugo then. Because Hugo was 2011.
Yes.
So we're into this decade.
We are.
It's an extremely different film to any film that he's made before or since.
It's unusual.
Not really an adult film at all. You could take a child to watch it. What do you think of that one?
Again, it's not one that I rewatched this week, and it's not one I could necessarily recite the plot to you either. But the only thing I really remember is realizing maybe like 2/3 in that it was a film about cinema, and I think there's a point where the main character comes across Georges Méliès, who was one of the really early pioneers of cinema and editing, actually. And I remember just sort of going, but yeah, stylistically, again, it's too much CGI. It looks really fake to me.
I loved that. I should mention that CGI and other modern effects, green screen and things like that, they just don't really affect me as much unless it's really bad. It's not something that I tend to notice so much. I know you really do notice when it's not done well. I suppose it's just not a key element for me. So watching Hugo, I have to say exactly the same. At first, I wasn't sure what I felt about it because it doesn't really have a simple plot because there's so much going on and it's not really clear. And then all of a sudden, yes, you realise it is actually a film about cinema and his passion for cinema. And it was from that point that I thought, oh my God, actually, I really do like this.
It sounds like we clicked at the same moment.
Yeah.
I need to see it again in retrospect. I need to know that that's coming up.
You can look at the first half of it in a different way, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely, it's
Um,
possible.
but I liked the fantasy element a lot.
Mm.
The huge
It definitely
sets.
had like a magical element to it.
It really did.
I was gonna say maybe that's why the CGI, I shouldn't mind so much that it looks quite over the top. Maybe it's meant to be.
Yeah, maybe because it's meant to. Yeah, it's meant to be over the top. Yeah, it's got a very fantastical element to it, and that really drew me to it.
Yeah,
Actually, I did really enjoy that about it.
I will definitely watch it again.
Should we finish on The Wolf of Wall?
Yes, let's do that. I have an interesting relationship with The Wolf of Wall Street.
Go on then.
First time I watched it was, I think, a couple of hours before the Oscars ceremony of that year, and there's a lot of like buffering, and that had an impact on my impression of the film. However,
I had the same thing with Django Unchained, actually.
okay, yeah, turns out we're both criminals, so um,
Mm.
and yeah, I had a completely different experience of it this time around. I'm glad I had that because I don't like coming out of films saying that I didn't like films. I like to be able to say that I could at least see the value and appreciate what was trying to be done. But I actually enjoyed it this time around, which is good.
Good, good. I've actually only seen it the once.
Hmm.
I haven't watched it again. I really should maybe watch it again because I remember enjoying it. It's very long though.
It's quite long. Yeah, he does do long films.
It's a long film. You don't really feel a length with that one though. I don't think as far as I
Hmm.
remember, but it's just so out there. It's extravagant and
Mm.
there's like scenes in it that you can't believe you're watching. I remember distinctly the Quaalude scene
Mm.
and him like falling down the steps and opening his car door with his foot.
Oh, I see.
You
Yeah,
know, I mean, it's like you don't know whether to laugh or be horrified.
yeah.
Like you mentioned earlier, you don't know whether you're supposed to enjoy it or.
It's that dark comedy. Should I be laughing at this?
Mm.
Again, the tone is never settled in one place or another.
Yeah, and it's very modern for his type of film.
Mm.
It really does sit in a modern time
Hmm.
and have very modern feel to it, which a lot of his films don't have.
Mm. It's a good example as well of where we experience the entire story from the point of view and the perspective of the main
Mm.
character. Again, we get his voiceover all the way through. There's times where he breaks the fourth wall literally and he just starts talking directly to the camera.
That was an interesting style.
He had done it right at the end of Goodfellas as well. In the court scene, I think Henry Hill stands up and he addresses us directly.
Mm.
But in Wolf of Wall Street, again, he's a very unreliable narrator, really, because sometimes we even see things
Yeah,
not in the way that they actually happen.
yeah,
When you say he gets into his car that one time and he says, "Oh, I drove as carefully as I could and got home in one piece, thankfully." But he wakes up, the police are over him,
yeah,
and they go outside, and his car's actually trashed. So
yeah.
it's interesting that we can never quite trust the character that we're meant to rely on to tell us the story.
It's an entertaining film as well, in more so than maybe how am I trying to say this? It's more of a fan film
Mm,
than maybe some of his others
yeah.
because he is quite not a cult filmmaker, but he has his specific fans and he's more of an independent filmmaker,
Mm,
or he was at least, especially in his early career. But he's becoming much more
mm.
mainstream.
His casting choices, I think, definitely say something.
Yeah, this really is a mainstream movie,
Hmm.
and that's interesting to see.
Mm. It's got to the point now where obviously we're having The Irishman coming out, and it's at a
Mm.
stage where everyone is now. It's exciting now when a new film is announced.
Yeah, because he's got more of a mainstream audience
Mm,
now, as well as having that legacy and the fans from classic
mm,
movies. It's all kind of merged together. So there's so much hype about The Irishman because it's going back to that classic Goodfellas casino type of
yeah.
movie, but he's doing it on Netflix with the mainstream audience and cast, and everybody is all merging together. So that's going to be quite
Mm,
interesting to see how it actually plays out to audiences. I mean, it's worth noting that on Rotten Tomatoes, it does have a 96%
mm,
tomato meter rating and a 92% audience
mhm.
score.
I'm guessing this is from the cinema release.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So it'd be interesting to see how it plays
How
out
it
to
changes.
a normal audience when everybody else gets to see it.
Absolutely. It's his longest film as well.
Yeah, 3.5 hours.
Really.
So I mean, that's probably one of the longest films, especially nowadays.
Yeah, you don't get them that long anymore, really.
No, so it's going to be interesting. So should we give our top five?
We should say we would usually do a top 10, But we haven't managed to see everything this week, maybe that we'd want to. So we're going to give a more
Mm.
focused top five and make a more informed opinion. We might change this in the future. Who knows?
Yeah.
Is your top five based off your favourite, or is your top five based on what you think is the best?
My top 5 is my favourite.
Hmm.
They are very different lists. They would be different lists.
Mm.
Um, but this is purely based on favourite
I'm
film.
much easier. My favourites are always the ones I consider to be the best.
Yes, they always are. Mine are the lists that are more complicated.
Yeah. So counting up from 5 to 1, my number five, we haven't talked about it a lot today, and it is in a way a little bit forgettable in some senses, but I've put Casino as number five.
Okay.
I think in terms of world building,
Hmm.
it's fantastic. Most of it is set inside that casino, and just seeing the behind the scenes and how it's run, how they catch out people who are cheating.
Hmm.
There's one bit where De Niro comments how like the dealers are watching the players and the boxmen are watching the dealers, and
Yeah.
it moves around this space. And I remember being engrossed in that. And Sharon Stone as like a hustler is great. I think she was one of the best parts of that film.
Mm. My only issue with that one was I watched it in quite close proximity to watching Goodfellas for the first time as well,
Literally same this week. Yeah,
and I found that it seemed like a lesser
yeah,
Goodfellas, and there was lots of repetition in there. I think that's why I don't rate it as much, because I watched them so close together. Maybe if I had, then I would have maybe appreciated it more.
I agree with you there. Yeah, that's my number five.
Okay, so my number 5 is Hugo, and
Mm,
we've talked about
okay.
that already. I just think it looks stunning. It's got that magical fantasy element, which it just really attracts me anyway. And it's got a love of film, and as a lover of film, I don't think you can watch a film about films without enjoying that.
I have a feeling between us we might get 10 different films. We might
Yeah,
cover a top 10.
probably.
Yeah, no, it's possible.
So you're number 4 then.
My number four, I until this week I wouldn't have put it in my top five at all, but I'm glad I've re-seen it now, and that's The Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh, okay, okay.
I think it's a really solid entry. Like I say, it's kind of fun, it's kind of dark. I think it's just one of his really all-round dynamic films.
Okay, so number 4 for me is Goodfellas.
Okay, I'm glad it got in the top five.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I said, I'm not really into the gangster film, but I think this one, it was just one of those things where his style of
Mm,
movie and the story
yeah,
collided, um, and it was quite enjoyable. And I do like films that follow a journey.
yeah, you definitely get the sense of a life.
Yeah, exactly. And I tend to be drawn to films like that, so I enjoyed that part of it that covers a large expanse of time or a journey somewhere,
Mhm.
and that really played into plot points that I like. And so for me, that one
Yeah,
was definitely
I
up
agree
there.
that it's got this. It's just got an overall enjoyability factor. I love it.
Mm, yeah, it really does. Yeah.
Number three for me. Oh, it's hard when it gets to the top three. I've put Taxi Driver as number three. Um, Absolutely love it.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong. Love the soundtrack. Love De Niro in that. I love it as a whole. It's almost like it's a snapshot. You don't get the sense of a life like you just said with Goodfellas. You get like a moment in time, and I like that about it.
Well, spoiler, it's not in my top 3.
Oh, never mind.
So my number 3 is Gangs of New York.
Really?
It
I
is.
didn't see that coming.
Really?
No.
It was very close between that and Goodfellas. I wasn't sure which one to put first. Um,
Right.
I do have the same sorts of feelings about both. Neither of them would be in a top 10 of, or probably even like top 20 or 30 of my favorite
No.
films. Of his films, the way I feel about them is very similar. And Gangs of New York, I think, had the edge because of Daniel Day-Lewis and the set pieces, the production design. It stands more memorably to me,
Okay.
and that's the only reason it stands out over Goodfellas, is that really.
It's only just settling in now that, yeah, you've put it above Goodfellas. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
I mean, I feel sick, but we'll carry on. Okay. What we on?
Number
We on number
2.
two? Right. I love my number two. That sounded
Okay.
weird.
I'd hope that as the almost number one film that you would like it.
I just can't say number 2 without laughing. Anyway, my number 2 is definitely not a number 2. My number 2 is The Departed.
Okay.
It was very close to being number 1. There's only one factor really that stopped it from being number 1.
Hmm.
The other film has something a little bit more for me.
Yeah.
I love the complexity of it. It's almost like a Christopher Nolan film in its
Mm.
complexity. I love that. Add in a bit of time
Yeah.
travel, and it would have been great. No, I'm joking. I love that it keeps moving, it keeps you guessing, it keeps you on your toes. It really makes you work for it, and the payoffs I think are fantastic, and I love the cast. Love it.
Okay. My number 2 is very predictable. It's Shutter Island.
Um,
I know you didn't like it. I know it's very disappointing for you. But I didn't see the plot points coming,
mm,
and I love the look, love the style. I love that kind of fantasy element when you had the moments with his wife in there,
mm.
and everything like just the aesthetic. I really enjoyed that, and Ben Kingsley was fantastic in it.
Yeah, he is good.
I mean, anything Ben Kingsley's in is,
He's just so gentlemanly, isn't he?
yeah, oh, he's just fantastic. So yeah, I did. I really, really enjoyed that one. Yeah,
Very good. Okay, well, who am I to say that your choices aren't good?
exactly. What's your number one then?
My number 1 is the first film I've ever studied. It made me fall in love with film studies. It was just as good 10 years later. Goodfellas is the best Martin Scorsese film.
A lot of people will probably agree with you there. I think
Mm.
you in a majority
I just don't
company.
think I have to say anything else. It's everything combined. It's brilliant.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
short and sweet.
My number one, which I didn't get round to rewatching, which I definitely will have to, is The Aviator. I just, again, it's got that film topic
Yeah.
in there. Anything that has got film in there and real people as well. So you've got your likes of Catherine Hepburn in there, and there's other actors and directors in there that, because I have such a love for classic cinema and like the studio system of Hollywood. Um, it just was fascinating to me
Mm.
to watch
It
that,
makes
and it's
complete
just,
sense.
again, it's a journey as well and a downfall, and Leonardo DiCaprio was just, it should have been award winning because he was immensely good in it.
Hmm.
And I just, yeah, I'm gonna have to rewatch it, I think.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch that one back.
Yeah, it's just got a quality to it. It's such a high quality film. You look at it and you think, yeah, they put their everything
Yeah,
into that.
I'm very excited to watch that again. I'm sad in a way that I
Mm.
didn't get around to it this week, but yeah, after watching 7 in the space of 4 days.
Yeah. Well, it can go on the list. That's fine.
Exactly. I might try and watch it in this week coming, just while I'm in the zone
Yeah.
still. So yeah, that's our top 5.
So that's it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So just to wrap up, we'll talk about, as we usually do, what's the next film you're going to watch?
Well, today is the start of my Christmas film calendar.
OMG.
So I'm so excited. So I always start off with the least Christmassy film and kind of work my way up so that by the time I get to like December, I'm getting towards like Home Alone and
Mhm.
things like that. So
So you're watching The Human Centipede?
no, I am not. I've never seen that. I don't think I ever will. I'm watching Die Hard today.
Right, okay.
I do not consider it a Christmas film. You can put that out there.
Hey, it's on your Christmas list.
I know that's only because everybody else puts it on there. Plus, I love Die Hard. I mean, who doesn't love Die Hard? It's amazing.
Well, I said I'd commit to watching it this year, and I'm very excited to watch it, if I'm being honest, so I might watch it next as well.
Okay. So should we say that we watch it and then we can
Yeah, we'll
discuss
do
it?
that. Yeah.
Yes. You can tell me what you think. I can't believe you've never seen it.
But like I said last week, it's on record now. I
I
feel like it's
know.
been on in the room, but I don't consider myself to have watched a film until I have sat down in silence with the earphones.
Yeah. 2019 is the year. It's on every Christmas. You have to watch it.
Right, okay. Well, I want to. This is the thing. I do want to. I do want to, and I will. I will. The next film I'm gonna watch, if it's not Die Hard, we're doing Netflix next week.
We are, yeah.
Netflix and the future of cinema, and the new film The King with Timothy Chalamet has just come out about young Henry V.
It has, yeah.
That's good preparation, so I'll probably watch that one next.
Mm.
I like Timothy. You hate Timothy, don't you?
I do. Well, hate's a strong word, but I dislike him
Aw.
to an extraordinary amount. I don't understand the love for Timothy Chalamet. We'll talk about that next week.
Okay.
What film are you going to recommend?
This is the thing I almost forgot to prepare for, but I have got one. The film I'm going to recommend this week, and again, like last week, I can't believe if they haven't seen this, why not? The film I'm going to recommend is My Big Fat Greek Wedding,
Oh, that's a great one.
which was written and starred Nia Vardalos, and it was based off a one-woman play that she once did. It's based on a true story about how she falls in love with a non-Greek, and her very large, loud Greek family are very disappointed.
Oh, it's lovely. It's a lovely
It got her
film.
a Golden Globe acting nomination, a Screen Actors Guild nomination, and it got her an Oscar nomination for writing. She didn't win any, I don't think, but
Did it?
I think it's brilliant. It's quote per minute. You know, you can quote it all day long. I do. There's nothing else like it either.
It's a real feel good. You finish that and you just feel really happy.
Love it. And you?
My film I'm going to recommend. I've seen it probably only once all the way through, but it was just such a visceral reaction. It has stuck with me ever since, and we're going back years. And it's Brothers. It came
Yeah.
out in 2009, and it stars Tobey Maguire, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Natalie Portman.
Yeah.
And it is about a soldier, Tobey Maguire, who goes away to war and is thought dead, and he's captured by enemy forces and put through hell, basically. And his brother, his little brother, Jake Gyllenhaal, comes in and helps the family out and tries to get them through the grieving process. And then Tobey Maguire comes back, and he is a changed man. And it is probably the best performance I've ever seen Tobey Maguire give,
I
and it is
agree.
absolutely
It's gripping.
superb. It's such a fantastic film. It's very small, and a lot of people probably haven't even heard of it.
It feels almost like it's a play, a very small,
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic.
yeah, really powerful performances. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's on my list too. So you've stolen that one.
Sorry,
No, that's
sorry, but
fine.
yeah,
I'll have My Big Fat Greek Wedding. It's fine.
okay.
Lovely. Okay.
So that's it.
That's it. Where can you find us? You can find us on Facebook and YouTube under the name CineChat Podcast, or on Instagram we're at CineChat_official. You're probably already listening on Spotify or Spreaker. We're hoping to get iTunes set up soon. And where can they email us, Mary?
They can email us at our start again. They can email us at cinechatofficial@gmail.com.
Yay! We nailed it. Thank you to everyone who's given us feedback so far. We really appreciate that. Please keep the comments coming. Subscribe, whatever.
Tell your friends.
Tell your friends. You never know. They might love Scorsese and long films. Up next week, we're having Netflix and we'll be discussing the future of cinema. Won't we?
We will.
You sound ecstatic, Mary. We'll see you next week. I've been Matt.
I've been Mary.
Good day.
Bye.